The Director General, Energy Commission of Nigeria, ECN, Dr. Mustafa Abdullahi, has assured world leaders of the country's total commitment to clean, cooling and energy initiative adopted at the ongoing UN Climate Change Summit in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. He gave the assurance in an address at a high-level meeting attended by world leaders and other critical stakeholders on climate change. Speaking at the event, which witnessed the launch of the Global Cooling Pledge, Dr. Abdullahi was emphatic on Nigeria's commitment to the initiative as recently championed by the Commission in partnership with the United Nations Environment Programme. He said, as the head of the country's lead agency on energy, his commitment to drive a new energy economy that will be in line with the global best practices is unwavering. The ECN Director General also used the roundtable discussion to affirm President Bola Tinubu's resolve to aggressively pursue a climate-friendly energy policy in the face of global warming and live emissions. Now, to discuss this, we are joined by Temitope Kolade, his Senior Manager and Lead ESG and Climate Change Services at Andersen. He joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me on the news.
Good afternoon, Daffy. Thanks for having me.
All right, so how significant is Nigeria's commitment to clean cooling as emphasized by Dr. Mustafa Abdullahi, considering the global context of climate change initiatives and also the impact of cooling technologies on reducing emissions?
Thanks for that question. I mean, to start with, when you look at climate change, one of the things that account for so much emissions that we would naturally see in Nigeria would be generation of electricity, transportation, and of course, activities within the oil and gas industry and manufacturing activities. But we need to go a step beyond that and understand that at least up to 10 air conditioners are expected to be sold every second for the next 30 years. And that has a very great implication in improving the outcomes for things around food security, because you need to think about food storage. For instance, you cannot eat fish that is not cool, that are taken from the ice seas without having to cool them if you're going to store them, transporting them all the way through. And then human health, medical technologies for the use of vaccines and all of that. So indeed, it's something very critical that we must pay attention to. Why? Because HFCs, the hydrofluorocarbons, are the ones that are being used for these cooling technologies, and they have a great implication on depleting the ozone layers. Actually, it all started from the CFCs, and then we have HFCs now. Now the move is to look for more natural alternatives for these gases. And the other side of it is that there is no cooling technology that does not use electricity, and electricity will then go back to depend on some form of gas-fired plants to generate the electricity for the cooling technology. So it's something that must be looked into quickly across the world, including Nigeria.
All right, Temitope, you also did say that this is something critical that we need to pay attention to. So could you elaborate on the potential implications of Nigeria's partnership with the United Nations Environmental Programme in championing this clean cooling initiative, especially concerning the country's energy policies and sustainable development goals?
Okay, let's step back a bit and understand that the lack of cooling access threatens people. It threatens people's health, nutrition, and overall prosperity. I mean, having access to cooling is not just a luxury, right? It has implications for people who die of heat stress, for instance. Over 1.5 million people die each year just because of the lack of cold storage and refrigeration transport for vaccines. For instance, when we had COVID-19, those items that were being used for vaccination could not be delivered safely without proper cooling, right? Of the total food produced for human consumption, an estimated 14% is lost before it even reaches the consumer, right? So if you think about the agricultural sector in Nigeria, for instance, there is no way you're going to be able to preserve whatever is being produced. So if we have a turnaround from this, because the most impacted nations of the world are actually in Africa and Asia, and Nigeria are not an exception. So if we deal with this, we would have dealt with certain challenges with respect to our health sector. would be addressing issues around the agricultural sector. And once you provide food and health, then you have a prosperous nation.
All right, so now in Dr. Abdullahi's address, right, he mentioned aligning Nigeria's energy economy with global best practices. Now, can you tell us what specific measures or even strategies should Nigeria adopt or even implement to achieve this particular alignment?
Okay, the truth of the matter is that energy is actually a cornerstone for progress across the nations of the world. And so if there is anything we're going to do with Nigerians' energy economy, aligning it with global best practice, we need to pay attention to some key issues. For me, number one is energy security as a specific measure. What's Nigeria going to be doing with respect to energy security and ensuring that we are not energy poor, even though we have access to the raw materials or the major inputs to give us the energy that we need. What are we going to do with fossil fuel disruptions? We've taken subsidy to an extent away from fossil fuel, but how do we ensure that we are not still dependent on fossil fuel, because our budget going into 2024 is solely reliant on revenue from oil. So how do we diversify beyond that into the future? That would have a very great implication for how we then go into renewable energy sources for powering systems, and then the low carbon energy transition plan that we have. So those are specific things that we really need to look into.
But what challenges would you say actually come with these policies? Just, you know, in like a few minutes, just tell us what challenges might come with these policies.
Well, the truth of the matter is that you would always have counter policies here and there. Sometimes policies somehow sort. For instance, one of the issues that we've identified now is the revenue challenge that Nigeria has. How do we ensure, for instance, that we begin to diversify from crude as a source of revenue for the country, while we're trying to also do some energy transition? So really, I think that we need to look carefully and say, what strategic position are we taking as a country to ensure that we have the right funds to deal with the issues? Because we're not going to stay back and say, oh, we need sustainable development, and we are not requiring funds to also ensure that people people continue to meet, their major demands for livelihood.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Temitope, for joining me on the news to have this discussion.
Thank you for having me.